I believe we can start. So, good morning, and I like this location a lot. And being here at the Milano Wine Week, we can talk, and I like talking about my territory. So, I am the director of the Chiaretto and Bardolino Wine Region Association. We are on the Garda Lake. My parents were born in Bardolino, so my name is Angelo Perretti. I'm a journalist, and I also like working with the consortium because of the roots, because of these roots on the Verona side of the Veronese side of the Garda Lake, and the tradition of winemaking is very long. We have pink, rosé, let me say rosé wines and red wines in this region. And you're going to taste the red wines of this territory produced in the three historic crews, classified in 1925 and then abandoned in the 50s, in the 1950s. These crews are recognized now after a very long experimentation, and you will find the possibility to taste three rosé wines and three red wines with a cru. And so therefore we'll start with the Chiaretto wines. You will taste them as you wish, so do not wait for me, taste them, and then we will talk about them. And this image is very important. Well, this is Bardolino, the hills around Bardolino. So the small church that you see here, this is the San Vito di Cortelline church. This is the Cortelline area. Is particularly important because a book was published in the Bardolino area, and this area, this hilly area, this sort of amphitheater that we have here around this Romanic structure was the winemaking area for the Lake Garda region. And the terroir has been modified by man over centuries, and the shape of the amphitheater was very typical of the Roman time. So this is a Romanic church, so high Middle Ages, and the excavations 15 years ago, archaeologists found a Roman villa where wine was being produced. So this is the area for the wine. This is the area for winemaking in this territory. So where is it? So especially for those listening to us from overseas. So this is Garda Lake, halfway between Milan and Venice. So it take me the same time to get to Venice and to get to Milan. And the Garda Lake is the largest lake in Italy, 370 square meters in surface, and it takes you 2 days to go around the lake in summer because there are so many tourists. And going around the lake, we have 180 kilometers, and we have this larger surface of water having a very strong influence on the wines produced there. And you can see here that the Garda Lake is also located very close to the Alps. So this is a winter image. You see the mountains, and you see the Garda Lake, and you see snow. But in my garden, and I live here, I tell you where I live, in the northern part of the Garda Lake, just beneath the Monte Baldo, and I have olive trees and I have lemon trees. So if I need a lemon, I don't go to the shop to buy it. I go to my garden and I pick one. So the climate is Mediterranean, and within the Alps, sort of say. So this is a very tourist destination. So this the Veronese side of the Garda Lake has 35,000 inhabitants. In summer, we have 14.5 million people out of 35,000 residents. So this is a very strong tourist destination for the climate. But why do we have this Mediterranean climate? Because of that large water surface. The water in summer absorbs heat, and this is a sort of huge water container, and it absorbs the heat, and in winter it releases the heat it has absorbed in summer, and while releasing it to the environment, temperatures do never go to zero. And I do remember an icy period, a very cold period in 1984. There was another one in spring which caused some problems, and this was due to the climate changes of this period of time. So that water is important for this microclimate. To contribute to this microclimate and to contribute to the winemaking, well, we have also winds. We have so many winds, so that the northern part of the Garda Lake is very much crowded with sailing ships, and because we have winds changing all over time, and we have many teams coming here to train. And we have two winds specifically. This is called the Pelair from the north to south. And approximately midday, Pelair stops, and we have Laura from south to north. And then we have all the other winds, Gardesana, and so many other winds. And all these winds help keep the vineyards healthy, keeping the diseases away. I have my office facing the Garda Lake, and I know that it's lunchtime when I see the surface of the lake. So if the surface goes towards the south, this is still the morning, and the opposite, it's afternoon. And then we have other winds replacing these, like Landre, which is a very violent wind sweeping the Garda Lake, so much so that we have waves, very high waves, and sometimes we have some trees falling down because of the wind. This is the reason why sailors and surfers like Garda Lake, because of the winds. And this is the secret of our wine. You have already been served two Chiaretto wines. So taste them, because it's also very interesting to taste them at different temperatures. And now they are still cold because refrigerated, and then you should taste them later on. So the characteristic is that they are sapid, so they have salt. Why? This is a lake, this is not the sea. Why is that? We have salt because of the glaciers, because the Garda Lake comes from 4 glaciers, and the glaciers came from the north, from Austria, Germany. And the first glaciation ended 16,000 years ago, the last one 12,000 years ago. And these glaciers are coming from the north, brought pieces of the mountains. And one of the mountains crossing this area are the Dolomites. The Dolomites are composed of dolomia. Dolomia is a chemical composite of magnesium. and the soil of Garda Lake is very rich of dolomia and magnesium. So therefore, as a matter of fact, very close to where I live, there was a factory of pharmaceutical magnesium. Now there is a hotel. But in any case, magnesium was being produced there, not because this was the place where magnesium was present, but because of the glaciers bringing all these materials, different rocks were brought, and etc. So this richness of minerals of our soils gives this sapid taste to our wines, specifically for the Chiaretto wines, but also for the red wines. So when these glaciers are blocked, they were forming these morainic hills. The morainic hills are formed by the deposits left by the glaciers. We have two circles. We have the first, the larger circle of the Garda Lake, and then we have the smaller morainic circle of Rivoli Veronese, formed by the glaciers coming down from the higher part of the Adige River. And here the four glaciers left this series of hills that you can see here in this illustration. We have four circles of hills. The external ones are higher in altitude, and then they go down, and the most ancient glaciation left higher hills, and then the subsequent glaciations left lower hills and closer to the Garda Lake. We only have the first clay area very close to Argilla, and this is called Lugana, and we have a white wine called Lugana, and there is another one at the crossroad between the glaciers of the Etch River and the Garda Lake. This is the terroir, the region for the wines that we are about to taste today. On the morainic hills of the Garda Lake. So we are talking about 3,000 hectares of vineyards. So the soils, well, on the map of the soils, you can see it very well. You see the variety of soils. We have 66 different types of soils changing 100 meters after the next. So we do not have one single unique soil type, but we have different types changing. And if you can see top right, you see the circular hills left by the glaciers of the Etch River, and here you see the circular hills left by the Garda Lake, the glaciers of the Garda Lake. And up there, the green triangle, that is Bardolino. That was the clay deposit, the crossroad between the glacier of the Etch River and the Monte Baldo glacier. And we are talking about the clay of a very ancient glacial lake. And at Cavaillon Veronese, there is still the Canova Lake, a very small lake. And underneath there is a subsoil full of piling, and there we had people changing amber for terracotta, and so this is a very important area. Another important thing of the territory, together with the soil and the winds, are the altitude and rainfalls. So here you see different areas with different rainfalls. actually, and the more it rains, it rains. If you go to the north, the more it rains, and the southern part is less rainy and hotter, and the more you get closer to the Monte Baldo, and the more you have this thermal excursion, this difference in temperature. So for those who say that the Garda Lake has one single climate, yes, this is a Mediterranean climate, but it's not true. This because we have different microclimates changing all the time, and the microclimates have to be tasted, perceived in the wines, because otherwise the wines do not reflect the territory. And the altitudes of the hills here are lower, and going to the north to the Monte Baldo, yes, of course, vineyards are also grown 500 meters of altitude, and the Monte Baldo is 1,800 meters of altitude. So the territory is very varied. The wines, well, the wines. So the vine variety is a Corvina grape. This is red grapes, the most important in the province of Verona. This is grown in Valpolicella and on the Garda Lake, on the Verona side. And this grape is very difficult and very interesting. Very difficult. Well, the peel is rather thin, and tends to burn and dry and get burned if exposed too much to the sun. The wines have a very strong acidity. Tannins are not as aggressive as Nebbiolo, but let's say that if we were to make a comparison, just to make an example with other grapes, well, of course, we could think of Grenache of the Rodano Valley or Pinot Noir in Burgundy. So this is a type of vine variety with low anthocyanins, no strong tannins, very high acidity, and traditionally in the Veronese territory, this grape that in the new specifications can get up to 95% of cuvée. Traditionally, this grape was grown fresh on the Garda Lake, thanks to the Mediterranean climate. But in Valpolicella, the Valpolicella and Bardolino are only separated by the Etch River, so they're very close to one another. And on the other side, you have a different type of soil. So we have not morenic soil, but we have mountain soil. We have also some volcanic soil. On the other side, we have a continental climate, so colder in winter, and in any case, less warm in summer. And so much so that on the Garda Lake, we have always had the tradition of growing Corvina fresh. In Valpolicella, we had withering to get Corvina mature more. Corvina is famous for Amarone, Ripasso, Recioto, so withered wines, and Lago di Garda, so Garda Lake is famous for Chiaretto wines. So two different ideas with the same type of variety. And then we have Rondinella, another typical local vine variety. Then in the past, we also had Molinara, which is no longer mandatory, another local vine variety, which is still used rarely. And so let's come to Chiaretto. Chiaretto is the rosé wine. We like to say it pink. But why don't we say rosé, but we say pink? Because Rosato is the name of denominations of the south, Ciro Rosato, Salentino Rosato. So we have some denominations in Italy having the term Rosato. But in Italy, we have other wines. In Abruzzo, for example, we have a Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo. It's not Rosato. In Alto Adige, we have Lagrein Kretzer, which is not Rosato, it's Kretzer. And this is pink again. And in Liguria, we have the Chartreux. It's not Rosato, it's a Chartreux. And on the Garda Lake, traditionally, we have the Chiaretto wine. And why do we have Chiaretto? So we were a barbarian population of the Gallia Cisalpina, and the Romans, at a certain point, 2-3 centuries before Christ, conquered us. And they imposed the Roman social model. And this was based on the social model of the Roman rustic villa. Villa does not mean a building, palace. Villa is a village. And the rustic villa featured that model that was taken by the Venetian villa in the Venetian time. So the central part and the peripheral parts for the animals and the farmers, considered at the same level. When we had the Roman rustic villa, we have so many. The most important is the Catullo Grottas in Sirmione. And when we had the Romans settling there, and they had the rustic villa, they introduced a technological innovation. And they introduced the Roman press. This was a huge press pulled by the men, and they were pressing the grapes. But there was no maceration container for the peels, and they were just pressing it, and the must was just fermented without any maceration with the peels. And the colors are in the peel, however. So all the wines produced with this system on the Garda Lake and on the Cisalpina part were pink, rosé, inevitably rosé. So much so that the Romans were calling it vinum clarum, so clear wine. So clarum is clear, light colored. So vinum clarum, this term, which was used starting from the 2nd, 3rd century before Christ, in the Middle Ages turned into claretum, and in modern time, Chiaretto. So when did this term turn into a claretum from vinum clarum Roman time? So you know that the Italian language, in Italy we have the Accademia della Crusca, and the Accademia della Crusca defines the official Italian vocabulary. And of that vocabulary was published in 1806 in Verona. And for the first time in history, at that time, we had 1,000 words typical of the Verona province, and also including the lower part of the Garda Lake. One of the words marked with a capital V, so meaning Verona, is Chiaretto, and this is referred to the wine. In 1806, Chiaretto was so famous that it was introduced officially in the Italian language by the academics of the Crusca. So they've been producing it for 2,300 years. One of the most ancient wines, not as old as as the ones of Greek origin, produced in Calabria, Sicily. And for those who say that Chiaretto imitates French wines, say something fake and something true. Fake because it imitates itself. It is history. The truth is the fact that instead, when the Gallians conquered the Gallia Cisalpina, the northern part of Italy, from this side of the Alps, so they also conquered the Transalpine Gallia. On the other side of the Alps. And this region is Corduron, Tavel, and Provence. So this is why Provence today is the capital of the French rosé wine, and the Garda Lake is the capital of the rosé wine in Italy. So the Romans introduced this simultaneously in Transalpine Gallia and in Cisalpine Gallia. So on the table you have 3 examples of Chiaretto wines. So now I'm going to taste them together with you, and let me take off the jacket because it's a little bit warm here. So the 3 Chiaretto wines, the one on the left with this pale color. There's a reason for this pale color. This comes from the Monte Baldo, from the upper mountain area. Vineyards grown 400 meters of altitude just below the rocks of the Monte Baldo. I have not tasted it. You can taste it. So please, I'm not talking about you can taste it. And you will taste high acidity, edgy almost, because of the salt content. So again, for the mountain climate, continental climate, and rocky deposits, and the soil left from the glaciers. And here again here you can perceive how much at the crossroads we are between the glaciers of the Garda Lake and the Alps. And this herbs, well, this is the Monte Baldo. And this wine, this is pressed wine. So Corvina and Rondinella are harvested when they are mature enough. And when do we have this time? When the seeds of the grapes are mature. And our producers, our winemakers, specialized their vineyards for Chiaretto and for Bardolino, red wine. So the 2 vineyards are managed in different ways, because we have to get to the right maturation for Corvetto and Chiarina 10 days before the one in Bardolino. And so therefore we have to work on the leaves on a different way, because the Corvina can get burned, as we said before. So Corvina must be protected. So if you have to get it more mature, you have to uncover it before, and you have to manage the foliage in a different way. You have to have fewer leaves, otherwise you cannot get mature tannins, mature and the fruit, a mature fruit, and also mature grape seeds. So the Chiaretto grapes must be grown in a different way as compared to grapes used for red wines. If you use the same grape for 2 wines, either you have too high tannins on the red wine, or you have a too heavy part on the rosé wine. So we should stop thinking as Italians do, todos caballeros, with the same grape you can do whatever. So the wine is not the result of technology. The wine is the fruit of terroir. And if the terroir needs different characteristics, well, we have to respect it. We have to respect it. Well, this sapidity, we would lose it. So in the first wine, there is also a citrus, that we also perceive citrus fruits. And this is the Veronese Corvina grape. So it includes kumquats and sanguinella orange. And why do we do not perceive this on red wines? Because on the maturation of grapes, we have the cherry, strawberry, and the citrus fruits are hidden. And so, therefore, they processing with the press allows to have all these tones. The second wine comes from the south. So this was the upper north, and now we are upper south, which is much warmer. And in fact, you will perceive that the volume is more full-bodied, but still with the same sapidity and acidity. And the first wine comes from Tenuta La Presa winery, located in Caprino Veronese, and the second one, Borgo, and this is a winery. This is located in Custosa of Somma Campania, and is an organic wine. It was one of the first wineries turned into organic. Last year, this Chiaretto wine, according to the wine enthusiasts, was the best wine. Was the best wine in terms of quality and price ratio, and priced below $20. And so therefore, so rosé wines. Vai, viene il wifi. So the third wine comes from Bardolino. So we are on the lake, and so here we are 400 meters from Garda Lake, even if we are on the hills. And so, and this is a strange wine. I don't know the year. I believe the first two, 2021. I believe this is 2019 or 2020. Well, this is a wine produced according to ancient techniques. So in still, fermentation is in still, and then this wine is blended on ferns. So we have a firm wine, and why it is important to blend it? Because Chiaretto di Bardolino, thanks to its acidity and sapidity, it lasts as long as you wish. So I'm still drinking at home the Chiaretto wines of 2014. 2014 was considered the worst vintage of ever. But for Chiaretto, this was the best. And with the cold weather and the rainfalls of 2014, we could have the perfect harvest, maintaining the highest sapidity and the highest acidity. The 2014 wines are still very fresh. When you drink a Chiaretto, well, you can drink it in summertime at low temperatures with the light recipes like mozzarella and tomatoes, or ham and watermelon, and so on and so forth. And over the years, the Chiaretto wine must be served at higher temperatures, at up until 18 degrees in the Jesse Robinson wrote that Chiaretto changes the paradigms of rosé wines, because the more it ages, the higher the temperatures are for it to be served. And in this area, we also have black truffle, and I drink a 5-year Chiaretto. Why do I not drink white or red wine? Because the red wine covers the fragrance of the truffle, and the white wine would instead be too metallic, and instead the Chiaretto wine is perfect. So this is a wine for red grapes. This is not a white wine. This is a rosa wine. So when it's very young, it must be served very fresh, light recipes, and it can also last 10, 12 years. To American journalists, I presented a Chiaretto wine from 2008, and the color was perfect. The color never alters, and the sapidity and acidity remains. So we have many biases against the rosé wines, but it's now time to eliminate them. Of course, there are other very good wines from other areas, but I believe that our tradition is very similar to other rosa wines of the Cisalpine and Transalpine Gallia. So yes, I very often do verticals. So yes, at the event in May, I have followed all the vintages starting from 2014. So, because we had the rosé revolution, in 85% of the wine producers, winemakers accepted to abandon winery techniques to select in favor of selecting vine varieties. So in 2014, we had the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 2021. And the people liked the most the 2014 and 2016, very important vintages. And if you have Chiaretto wines from 2019 and you keep them, you will have a wonderful wine. So in the summertime, I like to drink Chiaretto with ice, and then I keep it in my cellar and I wait. So the question is whether winemakers have this intention to keep the wines over time. Yes and no. Up until some time ago, this was not even thinkable. Now we have winemakers who are thinking of keeping it. For example, the 2015 Chiaretto wine. So, for example, and now we have Chiaretto wines with 2 or 3 years. So the Veneto Vignabella, which also produces a Chiaretto wine which comes after 2 years after thin ferns. And so, but we have different wine producers bringing Chiaretto wines of different years, but these were not unsold. So these wines are wines kept. And now people are understanding that Chiaretto wine is a serious wine, and also up until 5-6 years ago, finding a Chiaretto wine was almost impossible. And if you have a Christmas dinners on the Garda Lake, it is normal that you are served Chiaretto wine. It's normal. So the 3 months in which the Bardolino or Chiaretto wine is sold is May, June, and November. So it is de-seasoned. And so it's 10 million bottles, approximately 60% abroad and 40% Italy. Posso uscire e riprovare a rientrare? Non vorrei fare troppi nomi, poi scrivi tu? Aspetta perché so verticals. So we are here in Italy and also in Hong Kong. So I would like to greet all the people from overseas and our winemakers do have also, keep many years, and so I can give you the names. And so let's proceed with the Bardolino wine. And here, hello, Baba, hello, hello, hello to you. So our colleagues are tasting our wines, and okay. And so Chiaretto was first produced 2,300 years ago, and the red wines were first produced in that church. So that church is a middle-aged church dedicated to San Zeno, a bishop of Verona. San Zeno was the one who developed winemaking even more, writing a very beautiful sermon where a comparison is made between the winemaking activity and the spirit of the Christian populations. So this church was donated by Re Pipino to the Abbey of San Zeno. In this church, which is tiny, only 4 people can enter it. There's no space for anybody else. So it had the Caneva, and this is the same name of a cellar. So the monasteries of San Zeno started producing wines in that cellar. So red wines were produced there hundreds of years after the rosé wines. So Bardolino is the village on the Garda Lake, giving the name to the denomination. And in 1900, a book was published, which is very important for the history of wine in Verona by Giovanni Battista Perez. And he classified all the crus of the province of Verona, tasting all the wines produced between 1895 and 1900. And it specifies the place of origin, the sugar content, the acidity level, the price, and all the physical chemical characteristics. And he did that in this period of time. Giovanni Battista Perez wrote that in 1825, the negociants, the traders of grapes and wines in this area, classified 3 macro crus in the territory of the current Bardolino denomination. And they had the same name of the administrative districts. The first was Caprino Montebaldo district, the mountain. The second one, the Morenic, Superior Morenic district, Bardolino district on the lake. And the third one, Colli Morenic Hills, or North District of Villafranca, the southern Morenic area. Of these wines, Giovanni Battista Perez and other people from that time tell us many things. So those wines were kept in oak barrels for many years before being sold. And they were shipped almost all to Switzerland, where the grand hotels were concentrated, where the European VIPs were staying. And in these big hotels in Switzerland, we are talking about from 1825 to 2095, those wines were sold as Beaujolais. And Beaujolais was Burgundy, the current crew of Beaujolais, and it was Bardolino. So you could find the Bardolino wine from these three crew. You could find Fleury, Louvain, or Volnay, or Pommard, all together. And the Bardolino at that time were very important wines. In 1825, I remind you that the classification of the Cru Bordeaux is 1835, so 30 years later. So why did Bardolino decrease in reputation? Because of tourism. After the Second World War, the tourists starting coming down from Germany, and there was no beer on the Garda Lake, so it was necessary to give them something to drink, wine. And so they started producing not quality good wine, but a lot of wine, and the reputation decreased. It was an economic success, and I remember 1980, 1 liter of Bardolino was 4 times worth the price of an Amarone. I'm talking about 1980. It was a large quantity wine, and Milan was famous for the fake Bardolino. In Milan, people were selling Barbera, but it was Bardolino. But the Bardolino was much sought after for the meal. And then its reputation reduced, and then gradually it gained ground again, thanks to some wineries and thanks to a project that allowed it to rediscover those 3 crus, which have been reclassified through 2 actions. One by Attilio Scienza and its team, who classified the different areas in terms of altitude and whatever we've said before. Secondly, documents were gathered in order to understand where the vineyards were located, and crisscrossing information, we had these 3 areas. And in addition to it, starting from 2008, we started tasting vinification or mid-vinification, deriving from here. How long can the Bardolino wine be kept? Well, also in this case, I'm talking about verticals. 3 years ago, I organized with the Canadian and American journalists a vertical from my own production. And there was Bardolino Bowl 1995 and Bertani 1999. So Bardolino has a very high acidity. So if it comes from a selected cru and a low yield with the high acidity, well, it lasts. Of course, the structure, the texture is not too much, but let's taste it. So the first you have in your glass is a Montebaldo. Pay attention, on the label you have a Montebaldo Bardolino. It's not Bardolino Montebaldo. So these crus have been recognized on the 14th of April 2020 with a change in the specifications. So this comes from the Villa Bella vineyard, and from the hills looking the Val d'Adige. And in that area, wines are slightly peppery and vaguely Syrah-like. And this wine is a selection of a vineyard. Villa Bella vineyard had Morlongo. which is a wine variety. And now we have Morlongo 50th harvest, which is the one you're tasting. And this one gained the 3 glasses in the Gambero Rosso guide, which is about to be published now. And this wine has a very strong potential in terms of aging. It's been experimented since 2013, and it's still a very good wine. 3 glasses were obtained in 2014, and it was not yet called Montebaldo, and it was not produced with this high percentage of Corvina. So because it was 80%, now it can reach 95%. And I believe that this wine may recall the salt and the acidity of the Chiaretto wine, but also we can perceive a non-aggressive tannin, because the tannins are very soft. The tannins in the very first phase are green. Maybe you have to wait 1 year, 2 years so that the tannins tame. So much so that we recommend cement, terracotta, amphors, or oak blending, so to soften them as much as possible. So this is a Montebaldo Bardolino. So I didn't taste it, but I know it. What is the fruit note? Strawberry, because the typical fruit of this area is the strawberry. Montebaldo, you find strawberries, and you find also and you can perceive clove. And so it comes from here, but it is positioned here at the very limit of the district towards the Valle d'Adige. And in that area, we have also this pepper note. And the second wine in the glass comes from Somma Campagna. So the winery is Monte del Fra. So this is the southern part, close to Custoza. And this is called Bonomo. This is the family. And this is a Somma Campagna Bardolino. And this wine has obtained 90 points by Jane Sackling, and it has just been released. Well, I know the style of Monte del Fra, so they produce these wines that they seem so light, but after 10 years, they are still so light. And you continue drinking them, drink. And in my opinion, they are very serious wines because they represent the soils of that, the terroir of that area. And the Somma Campagna area has the cherry, and but the mature cherry, very juicy and very savor. And the third one is the La Rocca Bardolino by Giovanna Tantini. And I believe it obtained 95, 96 by Dr. Wine. It derives from the lake area, so it is located here, Castelnuovo del Garda, where you see this bubble with the bishop, with a circle with a bishop. And so the southern part of La Rocca, and normally the La Rocca wines, especially in the area closest to Bardolino, so slightly to the north, they feature both cinnamon and raspberry. So we said earlier on strawberry, and actually here we have also a company by the name of Le Fraghe. Le Fraghe means in dialect strawberries. So these are the three crus and very young wines just released in the market. The Bardolino crus must have a lower yields, and the specs say 10 tons of grapes per hectare and 10 for the cru, but nobody gets to there. Normally 8 9 tons per hectare, and 1 year of aging is at least mandatory before being released in the market. Many winemakers wait 2-3 years before selling these wines. This is the big challenge of the territory, and to represent the territory according to the specificity and identity. In that territory, we have two historic identities we had lost. We have recovered them. The identity of the Roman identity of Chiaretto, Vinum Clarum, and the other is the identity of the old crus of Bardolino, which after so many years have returned. This was a great job because we had also to fight against the Italian bureaucracy, but we got it. We've been successful, and we hope to go back to producing wine according to a to the same level that we had in the past. So I'm available if you have any questions, if we wanted to talk about wines, but I would like to interact with you so that you can tell me your ideas, your opinions, whether you knew about this double soul of this area, so the rosé and the red part. Or if there are questions from Hong Kong, well, I'm here. And so I'm waiting for your questions.
Stronger identity for that wine, because at that time only few wineries used to produce Amarone. They started making a new style of Amarone, and this was a big success. Recioto almost disappeared. It's very difficult to find Recioto, and Amarone
Potenziale di invecchiamento. Potenziale di invecchiamento.
But this started with the vintage 1988. The first important vintage for Amarone was 1988. I can tell you because I used to deal with the Gabriel Rosso guide, and I was one of the critics tasting wines from the province of Verona, and I started having a look at the big transformation of Gabriel Rosso, and in my opinion, the old Amarone and the aged Amarone are very, very, very important. Yes, because it was considered to be an error, a mistake. some wines. Bertani used to make very important Amarone in the past as well, or the other wineries. Quintarelli used to make Amarone. But there were very few wineries making Amarone. The other wineries had Recioto as the first wine of their company, or Concetta, or the regular Concetta. During the 80s, there was a big transformation. I hope that now we are going to have a big transformation as well, but we are not searching for bold wines. We are not searching for structure. We are searching for what the French say, finesse, elegance.
We have a question from Hong Kong. What is the aging potential of Bardolino?
Rispondo in inglese o in italiano? In italiano.
Okay, let me answer in Italian. Okay. So the aging potential of Bardolino is about 5-6 years. The aging potential of Cru of Bardolino is 20 years. So these are two different things. And last week, I have organized a tasting session of the experiments that we did on Cru with all the years from 2006 to 2021. And in 2006, I still have 3 bottles, and it was so good. 2006 is still very young. So we have to divide Bardolino, regular Bardolino. The potential is 5-6 years. Cru Bardolino, Monte Rocco, Monte Baldor, and Campagna, 20 years. So these are these 3 are all 2020. Yes, Giovanna's wine seems to be more evolved. So she's saying the third wine by Giovanna Tantini seems to be more evolved as compared to the other 2, even if these are all 2020. Yes, this is a typical style of Giovanna. So when they release, and then of course the Corvina has a strange process. It closes sort of, and then it opens again, and it goes back to the fruit, citrus fruits, so wild berries, and it's sort of a second life. And Giovanna is so good in making these interpretations. Unfortunately, I cannot demonstrate it because this is not the place, and we do not have the wine of the previous years. But this is typical of Giovanna. Yes, there is a different use of wood. And let's say Giovanna Tantini, so the third red wine, I believe it has 20% of mass in oak and then the rest in steel. And Bonomo and Soma Campagna and Villabella and Montebaldo, they use large barrels.
Important question about sustainability in the Bardolino area. E io non so se rispondere in italiano, hanno la traduzione anche qui in sala? Sì, perfetto, allora posso fare in italiano.
So I answer in Italian. So sustainability, well, sustainability is a very important topic, and especially for us, because this is a very tourist destination, and the ecosystem is very fragile because the nature is very important. The ecosystem is fragile. There are so many tourists, so we have to work a lot on the side of sustainability. Currently, we have 350 hectares grown organically. So out of 3,500 hectares in total, we have 17% 7%. But with regard to the younger generations, there is a very quick turnover. All the young winemakers are going towards the direction of organic winemaking. So we have 3 producers on a biodynamic winemaking, and we have a very high number of vineyards managed according to integrated agriculture certified SNQP. I don't know whether one of these wines is certified SNQP. So there is a transition towards integrated growing and then organic and someone biodynamic. A project that was presented yesterday in Vicenza relates to the largest producer of the denomination, 2 largest producers. So we have a winery, Vita Vis, located in Castelnuovo del Garda, and Vigneti Villabella, the Villabori Cristoforetti families. Vigneti Villabella has already an organic line, and the entire production is turning into organic. And the other one presented a project of radical transformation of the members. So we have approximately 260 wine growers, and these are being directed towards sustainable and organic growing. Of course, this transition takes longer, but the results obtained so far are already significant. And yesterday, I do not remember very well, but Vitavis in 1 year, so since it started with this project, reduced its carbon footprint by 20%. So, and this is a lot in our territory. Of course, we have to do even more in order to have more producers going towards the organic. Le Fraghe was the first producer being organic, going organic. There was another question here. Ma sentono comunque o no?
Before 2020.
È il wifi, Ma no, sì, loro sì. So the question is whether it is common to use the name of the sub-zones, the name of the subzones, or if they have blends from different areas. The subzones have been recognized on the 14th of April 2020, and only the producers, so making a bet, they risked the year producing with a new discipline, the specs, the year 2020, they can put their name on the label. And the most important production started in 2021, and the producers with the subzone wine are going to increase in quantity, but we do not want quantity, we want quality, good wine, cru wine. So cru wine producers are going to increase in number, but the production will be very little because we want very good wines. We do not want a regular Bardolino cru style. And so much so that the yield per hectare is very different. All the other Bardolino wines do not come from a blend of grape coming from different areas, but they may come from the same region, but not from the most important vineyards. So the most important vineyards will be cru with a low yield, and the less and the other ones will be regular Bardolino or Chiaretto. Non c'è. From Hong Kong? Is it possible to combine Bardolino and Chiaretto with the spicy food. Patricia Guy, an American journalist who lives in Verona, and she knows very well the area, wrote a book on Thai cuisine, and she said that for many Thai recipes, Bardolino wine was perfect because it is not so much, the alcohol content is not so high, and low tannins. And if so, for example, and the acidity of Bardolino helps a lot absorb the spicy flavor and accompanies. Yes, according to Patricia Guy, yes. And I must say another important thing. Bardolino, since it does not have many tannins, it can be served cold. I never drink Bardolino above 16 degrees. And maybe I also drink a Chiaretto warmer than Bardolino. And on the Garda Lake, the fishermen drink Bardolino, cold Bardolino, cool, and they put the Bardolino bottle into the water of the lake, and they keep it fresh. And when they come back, so they pull it up and they drink it. So our Bardolino can also be drunk with the fish recipes. And for Chiaretto, you can put the Chiaretto on every type of recipe and you can reduce the amount of salt. And so, yes, and for international authors, yes, they can also be combined with Asian cuisine. Last question from Hong Kong. For the 3 crews that we have tasted, how long were they? In botte. How long have they been kept in the barrels? So I have the technical charts, so let me look at them, because otherwise I may say something wrong. And I prefer to give you precise information. So with regard to Montebaldo, this is 1 year in a big barrel, even if you cannot really perceive the oak. And Monte del Fra, I do not have the time in barrel, but this was released 1 month ago, so 2 months after in barrel, so 1 month ago. This was August 2022. Let me calculate. Let's say 1 year and a half in large barrel, while Giovanna Tantini had 12 months in tonneau, 500 liters, and for 20% of the mass. So La Rocca tonneau, 12 months. Soma Campagna, let me say, essentially from December 2020 to September 20 and 22, and 1 year for Monteballo Villabella. There was a question here, from the audience. Very interesting. So a question on PV. 2 answers. First, I Oh, let's hope that PV are included by Italian legislation. Italy does not allow using PV varieties. You know what these are. So intraspecific varieties that are resistant to specific diseases. So Italian legislation does not allow, for the time being, the use of PV varieties for DOC wines, but only for EGP wines, IGP wines. I hope that the regulators authorize the use of PV varieties, because this is one of the solutions for the transition towards a stronger sustainability. And for the Montebaldo area, there are experimentations in progress on PVs, obviously not under the denomination, of course, because this is not possible. With regard to the specs, it allows the use of 10% of varieties that are authorized for the province of Verona. So the exact date on which the Italian government will allow PV varieties, we will have already everything ready. Unfortunately, the Italian legislation does not allow it yet. So since 2014, so it's not cru, because it's not possible to call it cru. This is a subzone, that in Italian this is a very bad term, but since 14th of April 2022, this has been included in the specs. Maximum 100 quintals per hectare, and for the rest of Bardolino 120, but almost nobody will reach 100 for the subzones. Normally we reach 80, 90 quintals per hectare. Why do we have higher yields? Because if we have this is a question of law. If you have a more productive year, instead of producing 90 quintals, we have 91 quintals. That additional quintals, you should not have a cru. So you cannot really, measure it in such a precise way, so that we do not run the risk to have errors on the years. So this is normally, on average, 80, 90 quintals per hectare in any case. This is the yield. Together with the Soave Classico Superiore, the error was committed. We had the Bardolino Superiore DOCG, eliminating Garganega, which is white grapes, to include Cabernet Sauvignon, something crazy. Bardolino Superiore is 160,000 bottles. No. We have 2 levels of control, and so the committee verifying the wines produced, and they determine. So we have the certification company verifies whether the wine corresponds to the requirements, and the other committee controls whether the wine corresponds to the style, so the vanilla, oak. So there are so many prohibitions in order to, But we should not have the wines of the Valpolicella. We have the wines of the Garda Lake, same grapes, but 2 different styles. So first of all, congratulations, because in 1 hour you made a very interesting overview on these wonderful worlds. But my question is, well, in some cases you highlighted for some wines, awards that have been given. Well, this is music for my ears because I come from the Liguria region and it's very similar to the Garda Lake. And the Liguria has a differently salted sea, and therefore, so here we have this idea. And also for the olive oil. So the delicate flavors seemed to never be winning, but still we have in the contests sweet olive oils never win an award because more structured, more stronger olive oils are preferred. Do you think that is something changing with regard to the preference of these products, or what do you think? Well, this is an interesting question. I believe that something has already changed. And I think that we have to thank the movement of natural wines as well as in cuisine. We have to thank Nouvelle Cuisine because Nouvelle Cuisine taught not really the form, but the flavor, the maintenance of the flavor of the ingredients used. The movement of natural wines taught us that it is important to note the expression of the terroir, which must be over the the terroir wines are not produced in the cellar, but you produce them in the vineyards, and the vineyards are separate, are different. And I am noticing a opposite trend in consumers. So Chiaretto di Bardolino is now a leader. We only have 10,000 bottles, very far from French wines, but 10 years ago we only had 3,000, and therefore price went up because people started appreciating these wines, and this led to the fact that more evolved consumers are knowing more about wine, that the color is not essential in a wine, but actually the wine itself is key. And these wines are becoming are becoming more and more successful, even if we have small productions, because we had a period of time in which the entire world. So my idea is that the red wine, we have two categories. On one, Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir. And there was a crash on Cab, so this muscle wine, alcohol with a high alcohol content, very dark colored, and this old style California school. Now California is producing very elegant wines instead, and Pinot Noir wines plummeted, so much so that in 1990s also Burgundy started producing dark-colored red wines. But now again Burgundy is producing beautiful tannins and lighter wines. So we have a world divided in two. So we have people drinking Cab more, and people drinking more Pinot. Well, I believe that these wines will have a great potential in the future. Michael Garner, a journalist of the country in the United Kingdom, is researching red wines with a 13-degree in terms of alcohol content. And it's very difficult to find these alcohol content. And there is a request for wines with a lower alcohol content. So less alcohol, less sugar. So this means healthier wines. And I'm noticing this change. I don't know whether this type of wine will replace the ones already in on the international markets, but it will gain ground. And it was the movement of natural wines making consumers understand, evolved consumers understand that first of all we have to focus on the terroir. Also even before the enological perfection. And I'm very happy about what is happening. When I was asked, because I'm so much interested in these wines, when I started in 2009, these wines were not at all considered by the critics. First of all, because of their potential, and secondly, because I wanted to drink good wines at home. Because they are signaling that I have to close this session, but I should thank you also from Hong Kong. Okay, thank you.